Wrong button. Now we're here. Hi, I'm Adam. That's Jai Kumar. He is responsible for making me, trying to make me a better soccer fan, a smarter soccer fan. It has not worked so far. We're going to talk about the World Cup. We're going to talk about the U.S. men's national team bowing out in the round of 16, where we go from here, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to start it off, and I'm going to ask you a broad question. Welcome to YouTube Live, Twitter, and YouTube. Was this a success? Round of 16, 3-1 loss to the Netherlands?
Absolutely. I think, if you look at where the program was, the U.S. men's program was in 2018 heading into Russia, bowing out in Trinidad and Tobago in qualifying, not even making it to the finals. I think that's why Greg was brought on, first and foremost, is to restabilize the system, make sure that we were able to get into the World Cup and then get out of the group. And we did meet our targets. And I think from a process standpoint, was it perfect? No, I don't think anyone would say so. Was there meat on the bone that we would have liked to have seen chewed up a little bit? Yeah, but overall, if I'm grading this, it's definitely a passing grade, probably somewhere between a B minus and a C plus. Which for me, I have my degree. So that's all you need. And I think from that respect, I think it was a success.
All right. See, I mean, first of all, I agree that it was a success. See, I give Greg Berhalter a better grade in so many different ways. I think my only criticism with Berhalter is in his choices and who he put on the field at the end. Like, qualifying is difficult. They didn't have a healthy roster for a good chunk of qualifying. Not that other teams didn't, but I think what we found out that when we got to the World Cup was just how little depth we had.
Right.
And because of that, look, they qualified, was it second or third? I'm not even sure.
Yeah.
Canada won. U.S. and Mexico were basically second. Canada did a great job in qualifying, but then they showed up to the World Cup and we saw what they didn't have, which was a lot of quality. Carolina. I've been doing that for like 2 weeks now. I don't know why. It's terrible. The U.S., we have a lot of good players. We are severely lacking in one part of the field, and that has to be addressed. But I give him A's for getting to where we got, and then we can nitpick a lot about choices he made and who he put on the field, and maybe even how they approached the game. I mean, he had his heart set on 4-3-3. He did change that a little bit against England to just widen the field and really play more of a 4-4-2. But, maybe our best players, even though there was some redundancy in position, maybe our best players like Gio Reyna and Brendan Aronson needed to play a bigger role here. And just because we don't have room for him, because, well, you got to take Pulisic off the field, you got to take Way off the field. Well, maybe you didn't. Maybe you put them both on the field, or all of them on the field. That would be my only criticism for Berhalter, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're grading, his performance in the cycle, I'd give him a B, I think overall, but if we're grading the program's positioning on how he got here, because I think there's a lot of layers to it from
Right.
U.S. soccer all the way to the players on the field, which is why I give them a slightly lower grade. I think that the hierarchy at U.S. soccer has undergone some turnover appropriately and kind of getting to this point in terms of the men's program, both from a development standpoint, their over-reliance, I think, sometimes on MLS, and not that MLS is a bad league. It's not. I think people need to recognize it for what it is, though, and understanding both when to pull in the Europeans and when to lean on who you've got that meet more of the traditional calendar that the American soccer program is used to, or places where I think we need to improve. And that's why I think the next cycle is going to be really, really interesting to see where we go from here. I think there are a lot of arguments for continuity and keeping Greg. And then where I sit is I think there's a lot of arguments for potentially taking a step forward and kind of evolving our thinking. Thank you for getting us here, but very rarely do you see coaches last 2 World Cup cycles, and
Right.
that's because it is hard to maintain motivation, focus, energy, and keep that room for that long.
I think it's fair that you could tell Greg Berhalter that you did a great job to get us to this point, but we think that we need somebody else to get us to the next spot.
Right.
And the next spot is not making the quarterfinals. The next spot is competing to go deeper than that. Look, nobody is arguing that we're as good as Brazil as we are doing right now. For all I know, and I don't have a TV in front of me, for all I know, it's 7-0 now, Brazil. South
I
Korea is
mean,
good, but
yeah,
that first half, I watched, it was one team was playing a different sport. It's like taking, your club champion in golf
yeah,
and bringing him onto a PGA Tour event and just say, "Hey, you go out and compete with these guys." It's not the same game. Whatever
no,
Brazil was doing and whatever South Korea was doing in the first half had no bearing on one another. It
no. I
was
mean, 4-0 is generous to
yeah,
South Korea, which
yeah.
is it was nuts. Um,
Keep your
but yeah,
main
no, I,
waves
I
to
I
keep.
agree with where you're saying, in terms of telling Greg he's done a good job. And honestly, I think he's elevated his stock and his profile
Well,
to where he's gonna have options. I think he is a interesting manager to look at, particularly at a club level. A lower mid-table Premier League team may be interested, and he might be a good fit for something like that. I just think as we're looking at where we want to go, there's some interesting names out there. I don't know where U.S. soccer is looking, but Thomas Frank at Brentford kind of jumps out the page to me as somebody who has been able to do more with less,
yes,
understands and utilizes analytics a little differently, plays a brand of soccer that would suit our attacking players. I mean, you saw what he was able to get out of Christian Eriksen when he went there last year.
yeah,
You saw how he's built Ivan Toney and Josh De Silva into that team at Brentford. And so I think he's somebody that if I had a wish list, he would be at the top of it. He works for an American owner. And so, I think that would all be interesting. I just don't know if you leave a top half of the league, Premier League program for the U.S. men's national team right now.
right. It's funny. I was listening to Grant Wall's podcast, and they said that before the last cycle, before Berhalter was hired, Pep Guardiola was interested, and it blew me away. Uh, right? No, I'm serious. No, so he was in between.
Right. Bayern.
Bayern, was it
Yeah.
Bayern
City.
and City? And he spent the year. He lived in New York, and he was intrigued by it before the City thing came to him. He's not leaving City now, but
No.
um, who that would be next level.
Yeah.
But look, I don't know who's interested. I'm sure U.S. Soccer would have some interest in Jesse Marsh if that ended at Leeds.
Hmm.
I don't understand the angst, and I want to make this about the men's national team. So I'll make this quick. I don't understand the Jesse Marsh is going to get fired angst at Leeds. They have to figure out one thing: how to back off at the end of matches because they've just given up late goals that has cost them so many points. But all he does is attack, 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 attack. And they have figured out how to score some goals at Leeds. Now, maybe we don't have the strikers to do it, but it would just be somebody interesting. And obviously, as an American, it would be more of a natural fit.
I think it's a perfect segue into the game against the Netherlands. You talk about attack, 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 attack. Louis Van Gaal managed probably one of my favorite teams of all time, the 94-95 Ajax team.
Right.
Go look them up if you haven't. That is one of the most fun attacking teams of all time. They won the Champions League. They were, I think, undefeated in every competition except for one. Like they won their league undefeated. They didn't lose a game in the Champions League. I mean, they are loaded. You can look at the names on that team. You'll recognize a bunch of them. But when he got to the international game, he shifted away from his 4-3-3 into a much more pragmatic, tactical system that we weren't able to break down.
Right.
They played like no other team. Michael Cox, zonal marking, had an awesome article today in The Athletic about how the Dutch tactically are different than any other team in world football right now, and how they set up for tournaments,
Right.
and how they use their midfield and their wing backs to attack. And I think you saw that against the United States, where they were just technically superior, and that was the difference in the game.
Oh my gosh. The one place where I didn't think the US would break down was in the midfield. And let me ask the first goal. Look, Tyler Adams was the US's best player.
Mm-hmm.
Played every minute. However many minutes there were, Adams played those. But as he was pressing up, they gained possession of the ball. And was it Frankie De Jong
Mm-hmm.
gained possession and he drew everybody to him, and then they played it up, and Memphis Depay just makes that run, and Dumfries
Yeah.
goes down the right wing, and Robinson can't get out to bother him, and the pass comes back across the 18, and boom.
Yeah.
And considering that Pulisic had as good a chance as you're going to have to score. Like, I'm not blaming him.
Yeah.
It was a really
No.
good save.
Yeah.
Noppert was tremendous in the match. But, it could have been a totally different story if Pulisic finishes that, but he doesn't. Again, fair play to the Dutch keeper. But then Adams is caught deep, and he can't track back can't or doesn't. I don't know the answer.
Right.
To pay, and or Memphis. He wants to be known as Memphis. I get it.
Which, can we pause right there? Like, they go into an entire story about why he doesn't want to use his last name, and then proceed to call him by his last name throughout the broadcast. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, he told you what you wanted. Just call
Right.
him Memphis. It's not that hard. You're like, he really wants to be called Memphis because his dad walked out on him, and
Right.
so Memphis Depay scores the goal, and you're like, guys, come on. Like, it's just rude at that point.
Same thing with Van Dyke. Same thing with Virgil. Like, at home, I call him Virgil, and my son is like, just his last name is Van Dyke. I'm like, yeah, he puts Virgil on the back of his uniform. I'm using Virgil. So, yeah, but we got beaten in the midfield, and to an extent, I called Dest and Robinson. I know they're fullbacks, but they're part of the attack, and we got beat. The other goals, one was Dest's fault, the other was Robinson's fault.
I thought Dest was fantastic outside of a few mental lapses where he just shut down. I did not think Robinson had a good game. I think Dumfries was the Netherlands' most important player. He created just an overload on that side over and over again, and like, they maintained their width, and Robinson continually got sucked inside. And I don't know if that's a miscommunication between him and the center back, or that he was just so nervous that he just went to where he had tunnel vision, was just going forward instead of looking at that overlapping run that was happening every single time. But he got exposed a little bit. I still think he had a good World Cup. I think overall, most of the players had a good World Cup, and they didn't play terrible. They had enough chances to win that game. But I was talking to somebody about it over the weekend. If you think about the difference, is the U.S. had 5 half chances, and the Dutch had 3 good chances. And 5.5 is 2.5 chances to 3 chances, and you'd rather have 3 really clear ones than a bunch of half chances. And that final third is where we are 2/3 of the way to being a really, really good team. We can get the ball from the back to the midfield, from the midfield to the final third, and then if you watch the ball, as soon as it gets in the final third, it slows down so much. And we avoid the ability to quickly move the teams that were playing from one side of the field to the other and draw them out of position. Especially if you noticed in the midfield, the Dutch were man marking our midfielders. So they were following them. So if you could drag them out and get the overload, there were so many times I was watching just screaming for that through ball out the right wing, because Daley Blind was so far up the field, and you had Weah and Dest in just acres of space behind the Dutch defense. But we just moved it too slow, and they were able to shift right back over every time.
That's what I put it in meatball surgery terms. We're good between the 20s, and
Mm-hmm.
then our red zone offense is not good. This helps me understand it easier. We're not very creative. So we have seen some creativity, but we're not. Otherwise, we're not super creative. And I don't even know if like the McKinney pass to Weah that was waved off, that was ruled off for offside against Iran right before the end of the first half
Mm-hmm.
of that match. Is that creative? I kind of think it is because you're seeing something before it's really there. And the run is good. Yes, it was a shade early, but the run was good. The through ball was great. The McKinney pass to Dest for the first goal across to Pulisic.
Yep.
That was also a brilliant play. But we don't see, especially as the windows become more narrow, we don't see a lot of creativity in creating plays. And I don't want to compare U.S. soccer to France, but for one of the goals that France scored, and I forget the game, Mbappe has the ball down the left, and he gives it. And again, I don't remember who he left it for. And then Mbappe stops and then just drifts forward, and it's just a little touch in, and he just flicks it. Like you didn't need a lot of power, but these little plays are so there. There's no room in there, yet they make it seem like this is no problem, and that's what we lack in our ability to create good chances out of all this possession. And I hate to use a Carolina Hurricanes issue, but Hurricanes have tons of possession
Yep.
and don't score a ton of goals from it. So there's
Yeah.
something missing. And to me, it's a player thing. It's not even a coaching thing. You can't
Right.
yeah. make these players do things that they're not really good at. So
Right.
that's where we lack, and that's where I get to this point, and I want you to talk about
All right.
this. We've got tons of good young players: Adams, Musa, Pulisic, Reyna, Dest, Robinson, McKennie, Aronson, Weah. Is any of them over 24? I don't think any of them are
24. Yeah, 24, 25, somewhere in that range.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know everybody's age, but I don't think any of them are that old. So
Mm-hmm.
theoretically, these are going to be this is our core for 26. Who among those players do they have to upgrade?
That young core.
Yeah.
I mean, the one position you didn't name is the number 9. You know,
Right.
that number 9 is kind of the one that is still, I guess, Sargent or somewhere there. It is critical that we get some sort of fulcrum in the middle that can either hold the play or stretch the play. Right now, our 9s don't do either. I think Sargent actually looked pretty good against Iran, and so I think he may continue to develop.
Good against
The other, yeah, I don't know if we need to necessarily upgrade on them. I think if they continue to develop at their level, they can be that core. Pulisic is as close to the finished product of that group that we have. And so if there was a position where there was somebody, if I was a young, 19-year-old that thought I had a chance of taking someone's spot through focusing on development, he's the one I would be looking at. But he also is going to be entering his peak prime years, that 25 to 28 range, by the time that next World Cup goes in to play. And so his physical maturity and his like kind of old man game, even though 28 is not old, is going to be an asset that we don't have right now on the side, especially in the attacking third.
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if he was a little bit better at finishing plays, right?
Right.
Or better because he plays outside, he plays a wing. If he was better at creating, there's not I don't believe he's amazing with the ball. He's really fast, and that's good. But he leaves a little bit to be desired. Some of the improvement, some of the upgrade can be these guys getting better, right?
Yeah.
Gio Reyna can be better. He can be used, first of all, but he can get better. Brendan Aronson can get better. he's Reina's already playing Champions League matches for Dortmund. Aronson isn't. Adams did last year, right, for
Yep.
Leipzig, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
And
got plenty under his belt. I think that's the key is let's watch these players' development. I think Leeds is a great place for both Aronson and Adams to be right now, but I would love to see them make a move into a upper tier team. As much as we want to bag on Pulisic at times as a nation, he did take that step. He did it at Dortmund, and then he went to Chelsea. It's a very tough environment. I think
geez,
that's helping him. It'll be interesting. He's being mooted to move to Manchester United in January, which I think would actually be a really good move for him. And
is
honestly,
he
the
going to
way
play
they
there?
play, yeah, I think they rotate. I think he could actually see game time, particularly in the way they like to set up their attack, either as a starter or coming off the bench. But unlike Chelsea, they are much more counter-attacking, speed-based team where his strengths will be utilized, and I think he can showcase some of the things he did at Dortmund, and when he was kind of bursting onto the scene in that role. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Um, but overall, it was a bummer. I think it could have been a signature win for the United States, and that's what's kind of sad is that the momentum is starting to build for this program, and you could see it. And getting to the next round, while they probably would have lost to Argentina, if we're being honest, or who knows what happens? It's a knockout tournament, but
Hey,
that
Argentina could do anything.
ability Right. That ability, though, to build momentum domestically for the men's program that lost a ton. 8 years is a long time from the last World Cup that we were in to this one. And so not having a signature win in this tournament is a little bit disappointing. I guess you could count Iran, but it's not the same as some of the other tournaments where we have these magical moments that kind of we can think back on. Beating Portugal, feeling as though we were justly undone by Germany in the handball call, or
Right.
even though it was Algeria, it was the way in which you won to advance against Algeria, right? So just thinking through those things and heading into the next World Cup, how do we continue to keep the momentum domestically amongst the fan base to kind of be behind this team so that they have the right advantage in the matches in
All right.
2026.
Let, let me just throw this out. Then I want to explore something else. We have
Yeah,
about, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes left.
yeah,
The How do you keep the momentum is I believe that as a soccer watching country, I think we have greater interest internationally than we have domestically. Like
yes,
I think more people are watching Premier League or La Liga, or maybe not. Even though Bundesliga is readily available on your laptop, I think we're probably watching more La Liga, more Serie A than we are Bundesliga. But we're watching American players abroad. Um, I mean, I know I watch a ton of Premier League soccer, a ton.
yeah,
So to keep interest going, like I hate to be that guy, and I'm not anti MLS. But to watch American players play and be counted on, like Adams, like Aronson, like Pulisic a couple of years ago when he was a more of a first choice player for Chelsea, that I think keeps the interest going. And when Dest wasn't getting any run at Barcelona, it was disappointing. And now he's
yeah.
playing some, maybe not a ton yet at AC Milan. McKennie, when healthy, seems to be a feature play, first choice player for them. So that's good. We need more of that. We need Reina to continue to play and stay healthy. So we get a chance to see these guys play high level, hopefully Champions League matches. And I think that will keep interest going. Is that, I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I think you're spot on in terms of getting those guys out there. I do think MLS has a critical role to play. I liken it, and this is a very crude analogy, and I hate that I'm even using it, but you can have a college team and a pro team.
right.
And what we love about college, obviously, is a lot of things are place connection, those places, those memories, that time in our life. But also, I think a lot of people like watching the next generation and watching that kind of emerging talent. And then when you get to the pros, oh, Pat pros, or where your guys are, right? And you're
Right.
kind of following them, and you can even have the ability to follow them in different teams. And I know there are a ton of Chargers fans in the area because of Philip. And
Sure.
you became a Chargers fan because of Philip, but now you've stayed a Chargers fan. And I think thinking about how MLS can really lean in and how US soccer should do, I think, similar to what Germany did, similar to what England has been doing with St. George's over the last few years, is from their academy system through the first division, having development programs in place that develop talent in a consistent way that says, this is American football. This is German football. You go to every academy in Germany and they're training similar concepts to groom them for the national team. And so when you get to the Bundesliga, there's a reason a lot of these Bundesliga games play out in a very familiar fashion. They've been developed in that way. And then they get to the top level, and the top players end up at Bayern or end up at Dortmund. And then they go to the Premier League or they go to Spain. And I think MLS can take a page out of that book and really, really work with US soccer to focus in on player development. Figure out what you want from the college system. Don't just make it an afterthought. How do you leverage that beyond just the super draft? How do you build an infrastructure so that when you're watching MLS, Alphonso Davies came from there. I mean, you've got some amazing players that go there. And then how do we, as American soccer, position MLS as the place where the best young talent in the world comes to get developed? I think if that could be the role MLS plays, that's a huge void that we could leverage. And it starts with better coaching at every level and really putting an emphasis on a more streamlined way to develop coaching badges. I know US soccer is working on that, but how are they developing that? Working with, the technical study group at FIFA, working with other associations and kind of learning how they are developing coaches. You notice how a lot of these big clubs, they have their players entering into coaching their academies. I know at Arsenal, we've got first team players that are helping with the U16s and helping with the U18s, and they're starting their coaching badges while they're playing so that they're ready to step into that. I think that is a huge opportunity for US soccer, and we don't talk enough about it. And if we could invest our dollars in that way, NCFC is a huge asset to US soccer, and they should be leveraging it. The largest grassroots club infrastructure in the country. Like, come on now. How do we make that even more successful and more valuable to the program?
All right. 3 minutes left. So this is where I wanted to end anyway. This is the way I process these things. You have a team that is developing as a fan, as a very interested onlooker. I want to identify this is a piece that has to be part of us going forward. So I think we agree Tyler Adams and Yunus Musa are absolutely core pieces going forward, must be involved. And it's going to be hard to find players that are better than those two that do what they do. But are there better players out there for what the U.S. needs than Weston McKennie, than Christian Pulisic, than Tim Weah, than Brendan Aronson? Now, not that these guys aren't going to be a part of it. They'll be a part of it because they're really good players and they're young. But without them becoming players that we didn't see this go round, do they need an upgraded fullback on both sides? Is there a better version of Serginho Dest or better version of Anthony Robinson out there for them to basically push Dest and Robinson, to a second tier role?
I hope that any good team is looking at how do I upgrade my first 11. No player should be untouchable, frankly. Like, if you were a developing program, and this goes for any sport, this is my kind of underlying philosophy, is the best players should play. And just because you have somebody in a spot doesn't mean that you need to stop looking. That said, I have not looked too deep into the pool. Austin or somebody else may be able to better better speak to that. I will say I think the U.S. should do everything in its power to recruit Folarin Balogun from Arsenal. He is an academy player. He's playing in France right now.
Right.
He's a number 9. He is behind, I think, Mbappe and Neymar only in goals with 8. He's got, he's 19 years old. He has the opportunity to play for England, the U.S., or Nigeria. He's born in New York, raised through the academy at Arsenal, is a number 9, is a striker. I know Greg has spoken about him. I think that's the one player I would look at and say, how do we get him capped up and tied up real quickly so that we can leverage that. If he's not going to make it at Arsenal, he's going to go play somewhere. He's good enough to be playing first team European football.
I mean, if he's third on the team at PSG in goals.
Oh, he's not at PSG. He's third in the French league.
Oh, yeah, I don't care where he is.
Yeah. So
I don't care where he is. Third in the French league in goals. Like, Ivan Toney didn't make England's team.
Yep. Well, you know why.
I'm just saying.
But picking up, kind of changing gears into the larger tournament. I got a little bit more time. I don't know if it's been kind of fun watching it unfold, almost like the NCAA tournament. You had like your Cinderella story with Saudi Arabia and some crazy upsets early on. Then you get a couple of mid-majors make it to the second weekend, and now it's just all right. Elite 8 on. It's the Blue Bloods. We're going to see who wins, and it's very fascinating to see it unfold in almost the exact same way we see every March.
Japan beat Germany and Spain to win their group. I mean, that's just awesome. A friend of mine who works for the Action Network picked Japan to get to bet on Japan to get to the semifinals. They lose in penalties today to Croatia. Honestly, brutal. Japan was pretty bad in penalties. I feel bad. But it was a great match.
They were fun to watch this tournament, though. Yep. Oh man, they're a good team. But that's another interesting team to keep an eye on. I think they're a good country to look at how they've done it, considering the resources and investment. They one thing that they showed that I haven't seen from the U.S. is a technical quality across the pitch. And so, how are they developing talent? How are they kind of going about building a program? I think there are countries like Japan that we should be looking to emulate, and not just looking at England or Germany or France. I think there's some inherent limitations there, but there's some peers in that kind of middle powers of soccer that we should be thinking about. How did they do it? How did they kind of leverage the resources? What is the way in which they're training their coaches, their players to kind of create an opportunity to be picked to go to the semifinals and not just buy a homer?
All right, let me ask you this before we have to wrap up. Who you got in the semis and the finals?
So I've got my heart, and then I've got my brain. It would give me such great joy to see Argentina and Portugal in the final, and Messi just completely embarrass Cristiano Ronaldo and win the World Cup. Like,
I don't want Ronaldo to play anymore. I want him out.
I'm with you, but just tarnish his legacy, where it's no doubt Messi not only beat you in a World Cup final, he scored a hat trick and you were useless. That would be chef's kiss. But I mean, it's hard, every game you're like, ooh, well, France looked like the team to beat. Now it's like, well, Brazil. I think it's going to be, our semifinals are going to be France, Portugal, Argentina, Brazil, with Brazil and France playing in the final and Brazil winning it all. I think
Brazil is frightening too.
If their attack is clicking like it is today, they have one of the best defenses, and they have the best goalie in the world, and the second best goalie in the world on their bench. So, like, they're really good.
So ESPN.com did the top 50 players of the World Cup, and Ederson was like 39th. And then I'm like, wait a second, he's not going to play.
Yeah.
Allison made, it was still, I think it was 2-0. Allison made a tremendous save that was going upper 90, and he got it right
He's a great
before it
player.
was going to go underneath. Oh, he's tremendous. And
He also gives you so much in that you can he's the best one-on-one goalie in the world, and he's got that aura about him one-on-one that gives attackers just a half second of pause, which gives your center back so much confidence to step up because you're not as worried about him having to make a save with no one to help. And it just creates so much more ability for your team to play through. I think Liverpool benefited from that, and Brazil certainly have.
All right, my final four. I have actually England winning it all, beating Argentina in the final. Argentina beating Brazil, England beating Spain. But I'm not confident in any of those selections now, especially since I actually think Morocco's got a chance against Spain.
They've got enough, I think, talent and some good players that play in high level on high level teams that they're an exciting. Yeah, they're an exciting team to watch. I think another program to look at, but they do benefit a lot from a lot of their nationals expatriating to some of these other countries, getting developed in France, getting developed in Belgium, and then coming home. So, cool. Well, it has been a great tournament, and hopefully we can keep doing it for 2 more weeks, and then next year we can do the Cricket World Cup.
Oh, I'm fired up for the Cricket World Cup. We got cricket. We got Major League Cricket in Texas.
Yep. Hey, I think the next World Cup's in the U.S. and the West Indies. So if you want to go to a match, let's figure it out.
We need to plan a week for that.
I know. You can do on the road.
It's a 1-day international. It's limited overs.
Yeah, exactly.
People will understand that not, but that's fine. They don't need to. Jai Kumar, I'm Adam Gold. You're the man. I appreciate it. Let's do this again as soon as we can get together.
Awesome. Take care, Adam.
Peace.
Bye.
Oh, wait.